You had stepbrothers. Did they come with her? Were they part of the package, or did they come along later?
This was not the first time of me telling this story. This has been years. It started me telling this story when my sister passed away. So this is like years of me getting to this point, to this layer. I always stand true by what I said. I always stand true by what happened. And I don't know if there was a right or wrong way, the way I handled it. I don't think that there was. And with what I speak with my therapist with, there was no right or wrong way to tell the story. I just had to.
Braxton just revealed something that has the entire internet shocked. Because according to her biological mother's name wasn't just wrong on her birth certificate. It was erased, gone, replaced, altered in a way that legally shouldn't even be possible without a courtroom, a judge, and a massive secret behind it. And here's where it gets even wilder. Ashley says she grew up believing her stepmother somehow had her name added to that same birth certificate. Fans are now asking the only question that matters: who changed her identity on paper, and why? Ashley Braxton never imagined that one sentence, one tiny detail buried inside her own childhood paperwork, would one day turn into a storm that the entire internet would be talking about. But once she finally said it out loud, there was no taking it back. Because the moment she revealed that her mother's name had been removed from her birth certificate, everything changed. Her whole story, her whole identity, the entire foundation of how she grew up suddenly felt like a puzzle with pieces missing, pieces forced in the wrong places, and pieces that someone else had rearranged without her ever knowing. And the way she said it wasn't loud, dramatic, or designed for attention. It was quiet, almost tired, like someone who had carried that confusion for too long and only now felt brave enough to speak it. She wasn't angry in that moment. She wasn't trying to create a scandal. She was just finally sharing the truth she had lived with since childhood. She said it gently, like a memory that had been sitting in the back of her mind for decades. My mother's name was removed, she explained, and you could hear how heavy that truth sat on her. It wasn't something she had made up. It wasn't something she learned as an adult. It was something that had followed her since she was little. The average person never thinks about their birth certificate. You don't wake up wondering who filled it out or why it says what it says. Most people grow up trusting whatever adults tell them because kids don't know they are supposed to question anything. When a child is raised being told this is your mother or that is your father, they accept it without hesitation. And that's the part people forget. Kids don't investigate their own origins. They don't go digging through paperwork. They simply absorb whatever story the adults around them build. But for Ashley, that story never felt straightforward. It always felt like there were shadows around the edges. Small details that didn't make sense. Tiny moments where she felt like something didn't match the way it should. And the more she grew up, the more those shadows started to feel like walls closing in. Because no matter how hard she tried to make everything fit, something was always off. When she finally said that her mother's name had been removed from her birth certificate, it wasn't just a shocking statement. It was a door opening into an entire world of secrets that she had been circling for years without fully understanding. The moment she said those words, people started asking the same question she had been asking quietly inside herself. How does that even happen? Because legally, it shouldn't. You cannot casually erase someone's name from a birth certificate, let alone add another. That's not a spelling correction. That's not a box you can check like a school form. It's a major legal action that normally involves courts, hearings, judges, and a formal process where every detail is verified. Birth records aren't supposed to bend that easily. They aren't meant to change simply because someone wants them to. So the fact that something this big could happen in Ashley's life without her even knowing, that alone raised eyebrows. And when she added that she grew up believing her stepmother's name had been added onto the same document, the confusion turned into suspicion. Because the only way a child believes that is if someone told her that story when she was young, long before she knew how legal paperwork worked. Someone planted that explanation in her mind. Someone told her a version of events that she accepted because she was a child, because she didn't know any better, and because children don't question adults they trust. As she talked about it, you could hear the ache in her voice. It wasn't just about the document. It was about the years of confusion that came from not fully understanding her own life. It was about being raised with a set of truths that may not have been true at all. And once she grew older and started thinking back on the details, the timelines, the family dynamics, the way stories shifted depending on who was talking, she realized how much didn't line up. And there's a deeper part of this story people immediately connected with, something that struck a chord across the internet. The idea that Ashley may have been raised with an identity that was shaped, edited, or hidden from her. Because when you grow up inside a family where information is controlled tightly, where certain topics aren't discussed, where questions are discouraged, it becomes easy for a child to accept whatever narrative they're given. And that's exactly what happened to her. She grew up believing a version of her life without knowing there was another version sitting in the shadows. The moment she said her mother's name had been removed, people stopped and said, "Wait, what?" Because that single detail didn't just hint at confusion. It hinted at a potential cover-up. It hinted at secrets that someone might have wanted to bury. It hinted at a story bigger than anything Ashley had even realized. And once you laid that detail out, the internet began piecing together everything else she had ever said. They remembered how long she had been talking about family tension, how she had shared that her memories didn't always match what she was told, how certain things never fully made sense even to her. And as people looked back at her earlier interviews, videos, and posts, it became clear that she had been carrying this confusion for years. She had been trying to understand her own childhood with pieces that didn't match. She had talked about siblings that appeared out of nowhere, relationships that never added up, and timelines that felt tangled. And suddenly, with the birth certificate detail, all of those scattered pieces started to connect into something much bigger. Even Ashley herself admitted that she might not have understood everything correctly as a child. She acknowledged that early memories can be fragile, that adults can reshape a child's understanding without the child even noticing. But the more she talked, the more obvious it became that even if some details were fuzzy, the core of what she experienced was real. The confusion was real. The secrecy was real. The feeling of not being told the whole truth was real. And that's why this moment hit so hard, because you could hear how tired she was of carrying the weight of not knowing. And as she shared more, it wasn't just a missing name that stood out. It was the silence around it. When she asked questions growing up, she didn't get answers. When she tried to understand the inconsistencies, she wasn't given clarity. Instead, she got more confusion, more closed doors, and more moments where she felt like she was being kept on the outside of her own story. And she wasn't angry when she talked about it. She was hurt. You could hear how much it meant to her to finally speak up, to finally say the things she had learned to keep quiet about. Because for years she carried the belief that maybe she was wrong, maybe she misunderstood, maybe she shouldn't talk about it. But now, after all these years, she finally allowed herself to say the truth she had been afraid to say. Something about her own life had been hidden from her, altered, or changed in ways she never got to understand. And that's where the tension grows. That's where the questions begin to multiply. Because now people want to know who changed the document, who benefited from it, who wanted to rewrite her identity, and who kept her in the dark for so long. And as Ashley continued describing the small, unsettling moments of her childhood, each detail only made the birth certificate revelation feel more intense, like it wasn't just a clerical decision, it was part of something much bigger that she was never meant to discover. And as she sat there speaking softly, you could see how deeply this had shaped her entire life. The missing name wasn't just ink on paper. It was the start of a truth that she was finally beginning to uncover. As she kept talking, something else started slipping out, little fragments of her childhood that she had never fully pieced together until recently. And the more she spoke, the more everyone listening could feel the tension underneath her words, that sense that her memories weren't just cloudy, they were clouded by someone else's hands. Because kids don't grow up feeling confused on their own. Confusion at that level usually comes from adults shaping a narrative around you, deciding what you should know and what you shouldn't, what parts of your life you're allowed to question and which parts off limits. And that's exactly where Ashley's story began to tilt into something even deeper. She mentioned siblings, not the ones people knew about, not the ones connected to the family's public image, but two brothers she casually referred to as half-brothers. The internet froze as soon as she said that, because half-brothers means a lot more than just family disagreements. It means different parents. It means branches of the family tree that weren't talked about. It means connections that were never acknowledged publicly. And the way she dropped that detail so calmly, like it was nothing major, made people wonder how long she'd been living with pieces of a story she didn't fully understand. She explained how growing up, things inside the house were tense. Not just regular family tension, but a type of atmosphere where you always felt like you had to guard yourself. She talked about a home where different children were treated in different ways, where allegiances were formed, where siblings were pitted against each other in ways that made no sense to her at the time. And as she spoke about it, you could hear the ache of someone who had spent her entire childhood trying to make sense of a dynamic that was never fair, never balanced, never loving in the way it should have been. And that's when she said something that made so many people stop and replay her words. She said that when you're raised by someone from the time you're small, you accept them as your parent. That's natural. That's human. But what if the person raising you wasn't actually the person connected to your birth certificate? What if the person telling you, "I'm your mother," wasn't the one who gave birth to you? What if the entire identity you formed was built on a foundation that wasn't real? That one thought alone can shatter a person's entire sense of self. And Ashley wasn't speaking like someone trying to expose her family for fame. She was speaking like someone who had spent years trying to understand why she never fit, why she always felt like an outsider inside the family she was raised in, why her experiences didn't match the story she was told, why her memories felt like they belonged to someone else's life. And when you look at the photos, and Ashley even encouraged people to do it, the resemblance is impossible to ignore. She doesn't look like the woman she was told was her biological mother. She doesn't share the same facial structure, the same bone shape, the same features. But when you place her next to Towanda, something changes. The alignment is immediate. The features match in a way that feels almost uncanny. The resemblance becomes loud, like a truth trying to force its way out of a closed door. It wasn't fans being messy when they noticed it. It wasn't people reaching for drama. It was a real, undeniable similarity that sparked a question nobody expected to ask out loud. What if Towanda, the woman everyone assumed was just another family member, was actually the one who gave birth to Ashley? What if the secrecy, the tension, and the birth certificate confusion were all connected to that one possibility? And that theory didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of Ashley's story being ignored, hidden, or pushed down. Her videos barely getting views despite being connected to a well-known family. Her voice being silenced in ways that didn't make sense. Her truth being treated like something that needed to stay in the shadows. And when she talked about it, she didn't sound surprised. She said it in a way that suggested she had always felt like her story wasn't supposed to be heard. That's where the idea of pressure started creeping in. Pressure from who? Pressure for what? Nobody knows exactly, but the shift in her tone recently is impossible to miss. After years of telling the same painful story with the same intensity, same details, same timeline, same emotion, she suddenly said it wasn't that bad. She downplayed the trauma that she had once described with heartbreaking clarity. She softened her words in a way that didn't feel natural. And the internet noticed instantly, because when someone has been consistent for that long and then suddenly reverses their entire story, that doesn't come from healing. Healing doesn't erase trauma. Healing doesn't rewrite memories. Healing doesn't replace your truth with a gentle version. Healing still acknowledges what happened. A sudden shift like that almost always comes from pressure. Pressure to change the story, pressure to protect someone else, pressure to quiet down before something bigger gets exposed. And when you combine that sudden shift with the birth certificate confusion, the secret half-brothers, the resemblance with Towanda, and the years of suppressed visibility, the whole picture becomes too tangled to ignore. Something was happening behind the scenes. Someone was controlling the narrative. Someone was invested in making sure Ashley never put all the pieces together. And she talked about how growing up, she wasn't just confused, she was discouraged from questioning anything. When she tried to understand why certain things didn't make sense, she was brushed off or redirected. When she asked about timelines that didn't add up, she didn't get clarity. She got silence. And silence, especially inside a family with so much visibility, so much fame, and so much public attention, speaks louder than any answer. The more she spoke, the more her childhood sounded like a puzzle someone else had assembled, leaving her to feel like a guest inside her own life. The family always looked tight-knit and united on TV. They showed themselves as open, honest, deeply connected. But behind closed doors, Ashley experienced something very different: distance, secrecy, shifting alliances, and emotional walls that were built long before she was old enough to understand what they meant. And that's why the birth certificate detail feels so massive. Because it wasn't just a name missing. It was a symbol of how much of her story had been shaped without her consent. It was proof, in black and white, that the history she was raised on may not have been the truth. And when she finally looked back at that document with adult eyes, she realized how deeply her identity had been edited. Not by fate, not by confusion, but by choices someone else made. And that's when the weight of everything started settling on her shoulders. Not because she wanted to expose anyone, not because she wanted drama, but because she wanted clarity in a life where clarity was never given to her. And as she talked, you could see her finally allowing herself to ask the question she had been afraid to ask for years. Who changed the document? Who told her the wrong stories? Who kept entire siblings hidden? Who shaped her childhood without ever thinking about the cost it would have on her as an adult? She didn't have all the answers yet, but she had something she never had before: the courage to finally speak about the pieces that didn't make sense. And once she did that, once she opened the door, the entire world started paying attention in a way they never did before. As the world finally started paying attention to Ashley's story, something shifted around her, almost like the air tightened. People who had never heard her name before were suddenly listening closely, replaying her old videos, comparing timelines, collecting every little detail she had ever shared. But while the outside world leaned in, something inside her story began pulling back, like a force working in the opposite direction. Because just when her voice finally started reaching people, her tone suddenly changed. After years of speaking with the same conviction, the same pain, and the same urgency, she softened her words. She began downplaying the things she once cried through. She began acting like what she endured wasn't as heavy as she had described before. And the people who had been following her journey instantly noticed the shift. Because healing usually makes someone more confident in their truth, not quieter. It helps them understand their story better, not rewrite it. So when Ashley suddenly started minimizing what she had been saying for years, it didn't sound like healing at all. It sounded like pressure. And the internet didn't need long to figure that out. People began pointing out that when someone has been consistent about their trauma for a long time and then suddenly flips their entire story upside down, that's rarely voluntary. That's rarely peaceful. That's rarely natural. Most of the time, that kind of reversal comes from someone behind the scenes stepping in hard. Someone applying influence. Someone insisting that the story change because the original version is too dangerous to leave untouched. And Ashley's life had always existed in the shadow of a family that knew how to manage their public image. The Braxton family spent years on television, presenting their unity, their conflicts, their personal journeys, but in a way that was still controlled, still polished, still within the boundaries they set. They had the kind of fame that came with careful storytelling. And when a family operates like that publicly, it's not surprising when they operate even more tightly behind closed doors. So when Ashley's story started gaining momentum online, when people began putting pieces together, when the resemblance conversations grew louder, when the birth certificate confusion became a topic on its own, it made sense that someone connected to that image-conscious environment might have panicked. Because if even a fraction of what she was saying was true, it threatened to unravel decades of a family narrative that had been carefully shaped. And that's when Ashley's sudden shift made even more sense. Because if there was pressure, whether from family, from legal threats, from emotional manipulation, or from behind-the-scenes conversations, that pressure would show up exactly where it did, in her voice, in the way she suddenly tried to cushion her own pain, in the way she tried to make her story sound lighter, softer, less alarming, and in the way she suddenly acted as if the details she held onto for years didn't matter as much anymore. But the thing about pressure is that it never fully hides itself. When someone is being pushed, their words lose tone, their eyes shift, their explanations become shaky. And Ashley sounded exactly like someone who was being guided into silence rather than stepping into healing. She spoke gently, almost nervously, like someone trying to convince herself to shrink her truth because someone else needed her to shrink it. She sounded like someone who wasn't allowed to speak freely anymore. And then there was the visibility problem, the part that had always felt off but now made perfect sense. Ashley had been speaking about her life for years, sharing videos, telling her truth, putting out story after story, yet barely anyone had ever seen her content. Videos connected to a family with millions of fans should have reached hundreds of thousands of viewers easily, but has barely scratched the surface. That didn't look random. That didn't look natural. That looked like suppression. That looked like someone, somewhere, wanted her voice small. The combination of everything, the sudden shift, the low visibility, the timeline contradictions, the resemblance to Towanda, the hidden brothers, the hole in her birth certificate story, all of it created an atmosphere that felt far from accidental. It felt orchestrated, like a quiet machine had been running in the background for years, making sure her story never fully reached the surface. And then Ashley added another layer, one that made even more people stop and think. She mentioned how she had been accused of lying, of exaggerating, of attacking her own family unfairly. She talked about how her brothers, especially the ones who came later, didn't see life the same way she did. How they thought her accusations were too harsh, too unbelievable, too extreme. And it made sense if someone wasn't present during those early years, if someone didn't see what she saw, if someone grew up with different parenting, different treatment, different experiences, they would naturally doubt her story. Because from the outside, it's easy to say that sounds far-fetched, but for the person who lived through it, for the child who grew up inside a home full of emotional tension, secrecy, and shifting identities, it isn't far-fetched at all. It's reality. But here's the painful part. When you are the only one carrying the memory of what happened, when others in the family deny it or simply don't remember it, you begin to doubt yourself. And that's exactly what Ashley struggled with. She started wondering if maybe she was the problem, if maybe she was misunderstanding, if maybe her pain wasn't valid. And the moment you start doubting your own truth, that's when someone else's narrative becomes more powerful than your own. That's when their version takes over. That's when your voice becomes quiet. And that's exactly what seemed to be happening to her. She wasn't just questioning her story, she was learning how to shrink it. And then came the birth certificate detail again, circling back like a shadow that refused to fade. Because no matter how much she softened her story, no matter how gently she tried to explain things away, that missing name remained a hard fact. That single, silent detail on a piece of paper carried more weight than any denial or apology ever could. It represented a decision someone made, a choice that wasn't accidental, a change that required effort. And if that effort was made, it meant someone had a reason. And that's what kept pulling people back. If everything in her childhood was normal, why did something so drastic happen? If everything was just misunderstandings and healing, why did her identity get rewritten on paper? Why were siblings kept hidden? Why was her story minimized for years? Why did she only start softening her truth after the internet began questioning the family narrative? None of it added up. Not cleanly, not comfortably, not harmlessly. And as Ashley sat there, speaking in a voice that was softer than before, trying to sound calm, trying to sound grateful, trying to sound healed, you could see the weight on her. Not the weight of forgiveness, not the weight of acceptance, but the weight of someone who has been pressured to carry a version of the story that doesn't belong to her. Someone who has been taught how to fold her truth into something quieter. And even though her words were gentle now, the cracks showed. The pain slipped through in the pauses between her sentences. The confusion hid inside the way she repeated certain moments. The fear rested in her eyes whenever she talked about her father. And the uncertainty hovered over every memory she tried to explain. She was trying to be careful. But careful doesn't erase truth. Careful only hides it under a blanket, and blankets eventually slip. And as she kept speaking, the question that nobody wanted to ask began rising to the surface. What if she wasn't allowed to tell the full story anymore? The more Ashley talked, the clearer it became that she was circling something she couldn't quite touch, like there was a truth sitting just outside her reach that she had been taught not to look at directly. And every time she got close to naming it, every time she brushed against a detail that didn't fit the official story, she would pull back slightly, as if some unseen force had its hand on her shoulder reminding her to be careful. That softness in her tone didn't feel like closure. It felt like someone trying to avoid a door that everyone else could see was wide open. And that door kept swinging wider with every detail she shared, especially when she talked about how her father reacted to her speaking publicly. She didn't say everything out loud, but the way she described his anger, the tension, the fear, the attempts to shut conversations down, those pieces spoke louder than anything she could have verbalized. She hinted that he didn't just want her to stop sharing. He wanted her silent, fully, permanently. And that's when the internet realized this wasn't a simple family disagreement. This was something that reached into territory most people would never expect. It wasn't about embarrassment. It wasn't about misunderstandings. If her father truly wanted her quiet, desperate for her story to disappear forever, that meant her words could cause real damage to someone's image, someone's reputation, someone's carefully protected life. And when you combine that with the possibility that her listed mother may not have been a biological mother at all, and that the woman who raised her might not have been the woman connected to her birth record, the stakes become so much higher. And that's why the birth certificate detail refused to fade away. It was the anchor of the entire mystery, the one piece of objective reality in a story full of shifting memories and emotional shadows. Names do not get removed and replaced by accident. No child wakes up one day and magically finds their identity rewritten without someone pulling the strings. And Ashley didn't sound like someone inventing drama. She sounded like someone who had lived her whole life inside a reality that didn't belong to her, one she didn't choose, one she didn't understand. And then came the piece of her story that made everything feel even more unsettling, the sudden appearance of half-brothers she never knew about. She said it like a small detail, but the implications were enormous. Hidden siblings don't happen for no reason. Hidden connections don't happen by coincidence. Hidden family members usually point to hidden relationships. And hidden relationships almost always point to secrets someone is trying to keep buried. So now you have a child whose birth certificate was altered, whose childhood was full of secrecy, whose siblings were kept in the shadows, whose story was downplayed, whose pain was minimized, and whose father may have wanted her to never speak at all. If you line all of those pieces up on a table, the picture they form is not random. It's intentional, it's planned, it's controlled, and told, directly or indirectly, that it would be better for everyone if she softened the details, softened her voice, softened the truth. And yet, even in her softer tone, the truth still slipped out. The confusion still leaked through. The ache still lived in the pauses between her words. You can't hide that kind of pain, not fully. You can't rewrite decades of emotional wounds with one gentle sentence. You can't unlive a childhood full of unanswered questions just because someone wants you to pretend everything was fine. And that's why people have been connecting the dots faster than she can explain them. The timeline doesn't make sense unless there were secrets. The relationships don't make sense unless there were lies. The missing name doesn't make sense unless there was something to hide. And the sudden pressure she seems to be under doesn't make sense unless someone out there is terrified of her telling the full story. And here's the part that scares people the most. What if Ashley hasn't even realized the whole truth yet? What if she has only uncovered fragments, tiny pieces, hints of something much bigger? What if the real story, the one her birth certificate is trying to scream, is still hidden from her? What if the people involved have spent so long shaping the narrative that even she doesn't know where the truth begins? Because every question, every inconsistency, every hidden sibling, every altered document, every shift in tone, every attempt to silence her, all of it leads back to one terrifying possibility. What if the identity she has lived with her entire life was built on someone else's lie? And that's why the internet hasn't let this go. Because once you hear Ashley speak, once you hear the confusion in her voice, once you see the resemblance she shares with someone else entirely, and once you understand the weight of that missing name, you realize this is not just a family disagreement. This is a story that has been carefully folded, tucked away, and protected for decades. And now, for the first time ever, it's starting to unravel. And the only question left, the question that nobody can answer but Ashley herself, is simple, haunting, and louder than anything she has said so far. What happens if she finally tells the truth she's been circling her entire life? Before we wrap this up, just sit with this for a moment. If everything Ashley hinted at is even halfway true, then this isn't just a family misunderstanding. This is a lifetime of secrets finally cracking open. And the truth always has a way of coming out, no matter how many years someone tries to bury it. The question now is simple. Will Ashley ever get the full story she deserves, or will the pressure around her get heavier before it gets clearer? And that's where you come in. I want to know what you think. Do you believe the missing name, the hidden siblings, and the sudden shift in her tone point to something bigger? Or do you think this is all one long, painful misunderstanding? Drop your theories in the comments. Tell me exactly what you see when you look at this whole situation, because your voice matters here just as much as hers. And if you want every update, every twist, every little piece of this story that surfaces next, make sure you subscribe to the channel right now. Hit that bell so you don't miss a thing. Because trust me, this story is far from over. We're going to follow every angle, every clue, every new detail until the truth finally shows itself. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next deep dive.